This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
The idea was to give the interim government confidence that there is somebody, a military man, who is well known, who can be accepted.
You alluded to the case of your son, Umar Farouk. Are you in touch with him?
Yes, he phones us 2 times, sometimes 3 times in a month.
As always, when I'm talking about late Abiola, I still thank my God for directing me on things to do when he gave me that leadership of this country.
Many of you honest Fulanis, you allow this man to cast aspersion on you.
You know, Zamfara is the mother of all bandits.
The biggest problem, if you permit me, is the fact that we have not been able to get the totality of our citizenry.
It's very, very difficult to have a fixed mind like that this one you will hand over to this person because you think you will do better.
I don't see myself under no circumstance ever leaving APC for another political party.
Here on the Mambila Plateau. And this is where the hydroelectric power dam is supposed to be constructed.
Most people in Nigeria are ignorant of the fact that employing a child as a maid is in fact against the law.
Access to the textile mill has been very difficult.
I believe, or I think that if you want to make money, it should be in a place where there are not plenty of people that can do what you do.
From the way things are happening now, I don't think the two parties will make any impact.
I've been talking about the updates concerning the campaign of Nigerian Super Eagles in Abuja.
Bola Tinubu has informed President Muhammadu Buhari of his ambition to contest for the position of president.
To be self-reliant, a blind man defies all odds to become a carpenter in Gombe State.
The country is now experiencing a 4th wave of the COVID-19 pandemic with the emergence of the Omicron variant.
Talks are ongoing between NRC management and the union.
Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. My name is Ayuba Ila. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning. And indeed, today is Tuesday, the 15th of March, 2021, and we are super excited to have you join us on this show. As always, I'm not alone.
Good morning, Nigerians. We're super excited to be here today again, as usual, to bring you some of the top headlines and some of the events happening in our world today.
And the struggle continues, Zainab. I mean, issues of petrol in the country is still a big issue. The oil and gas sector in Nigeria seem to be in a bit of a crisis, really. if you look at some of the stories, we have issues about aviation fuel, for instance, you know, selling at 600 naira. You talk about gas, which has been, you know, a problem of itself for quite a while now, you know, and then, you know, fuel scarcity on its own is also a big issue, and so on.
So many things happening
issues
at the
that we're
same time.
grappling with. So it's quite sad, really, and everything seems to be happening at the same time. You know,
it's really sad.
I'm just suspicious of this whole removal of subsidy thing. Maybe it's a spillover of that is happening to us. I don't know, but just my suspicion. Well, we'll be looking at all of that today, and also looking at the drive, or I would say rather, the debt servicing of the federal government so far. It says that so far Nigeria has paid $13.1 billion to service debts globally, talking about World Bank, IMF, and other debts in 11 years. And we'll also, of course, look at the controversy within the APC as they prepare for the 2023 general elections and many more issues. As always, we'll bring you the headlines on our dailies to have a sense of what the stories look like this morning on our papers. And then, of course, as always, today in history is part of the Daybreak show. It's always very important to cast our minds back to see what happened in our world, just so we have a sense of what we're doing and where we're heading. They say those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it, which is why we said, well, it's very important that as we talk about today, we also try to see if there's a correlation somewhere in the past. So that's why we have that. Before that, let's take a look at the news highlights.
The Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, plans to extend its warning strike for another 2 months. The union made the resolution to extend the strike at its National Executive Council meeting that was held on Sunday night in Abuja. According to the union, it is concerned that there were no concrete offers from the government to convince the union to call off the strike, and frowned at the statement credited to both the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy and the Director General, NIDA, to the effect that University Transparency Accountability Solution, UTAS, has failed the integrity test. The demands include the revitalization of public universities and academic allowances, University Transparency Accountability Solution, UTAS, promotion arrears, renegotiation of 2009 ASU federal government agreement, and alleged inconsistencies in integrated payroll and personnel information system payments.
Now, a day after Moscow escalated its offensive by shelling areas close to the Polish border, besieged Ukrainians hope renewed diplomatic talks with Russia might open the way for more civilians to evacuate. This comes as the International Committee of the Red Cross warns that residents of Mariupol face a worst-case scenario unless Russia and Ukraine reach an agreement to ensure humanitarian access. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warns that the Russian attacks could expand to neighboring countries and urges NATO to impose a no-fly zone. Ukraine reports that at least one person has been killed and 3 others injured when a shell hit a residential building in Kyiv.
Okay, now in business, oil prices dropped 3% on Monday amid reinforced diplomatic efforts to end the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Brent crude, the global oil benchmark, shed 3.20%, trading at $109.1 a barrel, while West Texas Intermediate also declined over 3% to $105.5 a barrel. Now, according to reports, the development is coming on the heels of the meeting between Ukrainian and Russian negotiators on Monday via video link after both sides cited progress. Negotiators had given their most optimistic assessments after weekend negotiations, hinting there could be positive results within days. The issue intensified as the United States banned the importation of coal, gas and oil from Russia, a major oil exporter which accounts for about 7 million barrels per day of crude and refined fuel, representing around 7% of global supplies. Now in Nigeria, it is expected that the downward trend in oil prices would provide succor to increasing diesel prices, while at the same time reducing importation expenses on refined petroleum products. The price of automotive gas oil, also known as diesel, has surpassed 600 naira per litre after crossing the 500 naira mark at ex-depot.
And in sports news, Lobby Stars management have sacked Eddie Dombraye as the club's coach after a disappointing home loss to Abia Warriors. The vice chairman of Lobby Stars announced the sack, also dissolving the club's technical crew. Meanwhile, the coach Eugene Agagbe will now act as interim coach to be assisted by goalkeepers coach, Coach Sam Adingi. That's that for the news highlights this morning. And let's take a look at events that made history on this day, the 15th of March, in our world. Take a look. Well, today is important for several number of reasons, and we saw that highlighted in today in history and also days that are significant in our world. Now, the first one there is the fact that today is World Consumer Rights Day. So, yes, the customer is always right, as they say here in Nigeria, even though some business people will not agree with that. But hey, the customer is always right. After all, we are in business because of the customer. So if the customer decides not to patronize you, then you are at loss, isn't it?
Very, very interesting, you know. I saw a video on Instagram. I think a mother, she usually buys Capri Sun from, I think it's ShopRite or where. And then she has never, you know, taken time to actually check, you know, the content of the Capri Sun. Then one of the days she bought one and she just opened one for her son, and then she discovered a very black substance, you know, in the Capri Sun. And she was really mad. She was like, she has been buying this for years. She has never stopped to check. And it's unfortunate that maybe her son has been ingesting this for a very long time. She called out the Capri Sun company, and then the I think Consumer Rights Commission or so, and then there was so much chaos, you know, happening. And I think at that point, I really understood that people are now, consumers are beginning to know their rights. They could actually sue a company for that, but a lot of people do not actually know.
Yeah, good enough. We have some policies and, in fact, some laws. We have Savicom, for instance. We have Public Complaints Commission. These are platforms that you can go write a petition if you like, if you have, you know, grievances against a particular company. So good enough we have that. But whether or not those are efficient enough is a different conversation for another day. But whatever it is, I think it's very important that we, you know, take those conversations seriously. And so today is set aside for that, to create awareness on the fact that as a consumer, you have the right to be served well. And if you are not served well, then you should, you know, take up that complaint. And then we have today is also World Sleep Day. And I'm wondering, Z, does it mean you should be sleeping by now?
I think today actually is to help us to advocate and raise awareness for sleep health, you know, to have a very healthy sleep. But I don't think we really get to do that.
How many people actually sleep well in Nigeria? I'm just thinking, averagely, on the average, it is required medically that you sleep for at least 8 hours every day. But I doubt if, you know, people actually sleep. In fact, some people even talk against sleeping for up to that number of hours because they feel like that would mean laziness. That would mean being lazy, sleeping for up to 8 hours. Some feel that maybe if you have like 4 or 3 hours of sleep in a day, that would be enough. You should be active for the rest of the day and all of that. But I think it's very important that we sleep. The body needs some rest. It's not the way we are designed. We are not robots, isn't it? You find that when you don't sleep, you begin to malfunction.
Indeed, you do. And psychologically it's draining, and it tells on you physically.
Yeah, there's a popular saying that you cannot cheat nature, isn't it? So if you try that with sleep, I bet you there will be a payback somehow. So it's very important that we take this seriously and do the most that we can to find time to sleep and give our body that rest, because sometimes the effect is not immediate, but it is as time goes on, you just tend to find that you're having disorder. They call it sleep disorder and all that. So it has implications. It's very important. Now, today is also World Contact Day.
World Contact Day. Actually, I don't know.
So contact
what
here, well, I believe contact, does it has to do with, meeting people, or making network, or contact, or physical contact, with people, or what, I don't get. But whatever it is, I think it's very important. We are human beings and we are interconnected. We must, live together. Now, in 1961, South Africa withdraws from British Commonwealth. And all of that happened on this day. In 1976, there was a failed coup in Niger. And then 1982, Nicaragua suspends their citizens' rights for 30 days. So imagine in Nigeria, your rights are being suspended for 30 days. I don't know what will be.
Chaos.
Maybe we'll see some of our security agencies beating up Nigerians on the street for no reason. Maybe we'll see things like that happen, but who knows? I mean, it's, should we try that?
No. I don't think it's going to work here.
I mean, the fundamental rights of everyone is what makes us human, isn't it? By the time you take that away, then there's definitely going to be a problem. Everybody's going to be like in a prison-like kind of situation, because you cannot move your right to movement, right to association, right to speech, and all of that is taken away for 30 days. You can't say anything. So people can do, well, I can only imagine that. In 1993, in a landmark case, Mohamed Tabet, police commissioner of Casablanca, is convicted of sexually abusing over 1,500 women and sentenced to death. Wow. How did he do that? I mean, not even the King Solomon could have done that.
Really very, very interesting when you see that.
I mean, 1,500?
That's huge.
That's like he's been doing that for his whole life. Maybe from right when he was a child or something like that. But it's not funny, really. Thankfully, he was sentenced and justice was served. Back in 2001, the world's largest oil rig located off Brazil and operated by Petrobras suffers 3 explosions. And then in 2020, we had the U.S. Federal Reserve slashes interest rates to near zero to support the economy during the COVID-19 pandemic. These are some of the things that happened in our history. Now, we'll take a short breather, and then when we come back, we'll take a look at the dailies on Daybreak, talking about, the issues of today this time around. Please stay.
When a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. You're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital. We have the dailies that we'll be looking at today. We have about 5 or 6 rather. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story here says Nigeria to lose 1.2 billion naira rather, and that's daily over Ajib oil export cut. It has the riders that says power outage worsens as electricity grid collapses, Minister operators in emergency meeting. So, just like I said, it looks like our petroleum industry is in a bit of a crisis. I forgot the price of diesel is also around 720, thereabouts, per liter.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. Something is really happening that needs, you know, an urgent attention. You have other stories there at the top. Mixed reactions over RCCG, PFN's new departments of politics. And then you see strike extension, parents, students lambast ASU and the FG, you know, rightfully so. The next story there, beside the pictorial, says Nigeria recorded 1,060 vaccine polio virus cases in 2 years, and that's according to the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Kano, APC. Tricky options before Shekarau's G7. And then the next one there, FG redeems House allocation promise to 1994 Nations Cup winners. You'd find that on the Daily Trust. Now below the pictorial there, you see Jet A1 airlines marketers agree on 500 naira per liter for 3 days. These are the stories on the front page of Daily Trust this morning.
Okay, on the Punch newspaper this morning, blackout as national grid collapses. Federal government summons emergency meeting. And the writers there say discos alert power consumers as 19 power plants record zero output. FG, TCN, Gencos, NNPC, oil firms, others hold marathon session. And then you see the writer that says major firms, public institutions suspend services as blackout lingers. Still on the Punch, right on the top on page 21, federal government may spend 93% of revenue on interest in 2022, says IMF. And on page 17 and page 11, reps NNPC intervene as flight cancellations leave passengers stranded. Wike, Obaseki continue verbal war. Governors allege betrayal, unguarded comments. And you'd also see a pictorial there that shows you the trial of Abba Kyari, you know, and others, confusion as Kyari's wife slums in court. Suspended DCP remanded. We all saw that video yesterday, and you know, it made quite a round on social media. You see all the stories on the Punch. 12 days to convention, APC holds forms, governors divided. Inquest, Sylvester died of pneumonia leading to sepsis, says doctor. And that's a new revelation about Sylvester Oromoni, the boy that died, you know, in that school a few months ago. You get the details of that story on page 4 and page 5. And on page 12, rumored planned police strike fake, mischievous, and this is coming from the force headquarters. These are some of the major stories on the Punch.
All right, now let's take a look at other papers this morning, talking about, say, the This Day. For instance, if you look at the This Day, the lead story talks about convention, microzoning tearing APC apart amid leadership crisis. And it has other stories at the top there. Says nationwide blackout as power grid collapses again. You'd find the next story. Wike attacks Obaseki, calls him serial betrayer, ungrateful. And then the next one, Atiku to formally declare presidential bid, March 23. Well, these are some of the stories on the This Day newspaper this morning.
On The Guardian, CBN in fresh plan to wean banks off cash handling risks and costs. Some of the writers there states moves to license shared cash hub operators, considers areas with large banking activities to accommodate individuals, corporate entities with huge cash needs, restricted to transaction not below 500,000. You'd see all the stories, an editorial on the top. On page 2, Russia-Ukraine war and biting realities in Nigeria. And you'd also see the story about outrage as ASU extends strike by 2 months. PDP, not your personal property. Obaseki hits back at Wike. You see also the story about Abba Kyari's wife slums in court. NDLEA remands husband, 6 others. Chaos at airports as fuel scarcity disrupts operations. And you'd also see the story about Nigeria may lose 170,000 BPD as Shell Ajib declare force majeure. And then you see amid costly diesel, grid collapses 24 hours after Genco's warning. These are some of the major stories from The Guardian.
All right, and now on the National Star newspaper, we take a look at a few stories there. The lead story talks about, PDP crisis, Wike Obaseki trade insults, and then you'd also find in Edo, we don't accept political bullies, and that's according to the governor of Edo State, Obaseki. Obaseki is zero betrayer, says Rivers governor. So we see a trade of words there. Also, we see other stories. Tension as police return, beef up security at APC headquarters. Other stories, Bambishe, manhunt begins for other culprits. And then autumn advocates fresh national conference. And then you have other stories there. Suspended DCP Abba Kyari's wife slums in court. And that's, caused quite a stir yesterday. At the very top there, you see FG kicks as ASU extends strike for 8 weeks. And then, of course, the story about nationwide blackout as national grid collapses. These are some of the stories on the front page there of the new National Star.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the stories making headway on the Blueprint newspaper. NBET, Genco's in blame game as national grid collapses. You see the riders there. Lagos, Kaduna, Enugu, Ebonyi, 3 others was hit. Power Minister summons discos, TCN, NBET, others. And then you'd also see NBET responsible for poor power supply. And this is according to Genco's. No, they lack power to generate 9,000 megawatts. And this is coming from NBET. And you see also the story about cocaine deal, Kerry's wife slums in court. Embattled DCP deserves no bail. This is coming from the NDLEA. You'd find other stories on the Blueprint. We have 3 days to shut down airlines, warn over aviation fuel scarcity. Ekiti Guba. INEC publishes final list of candidates. JAM remits 600 million naira to CBT centers. You'd also see the story about petroleum marketers, manufacturers groan as diesel hits 750 naira per litre. On page 5, Wike to Obaseki. You are a betrayer. That's a war of words. You find details of that story on page 5. And on page 21, GTB, Zenith Bank, 8 others grew combined profit by 120 billion naira. These are some of the major stories on the Blueprint.
Well, the story on the Business Day newspaper this morning is not any different, of course, talking about the power outage deepening Nigeria's woes. Of course, we know that that's a lingering problem from decades ago. Now, let's get perspectives on some of the stories on our front pages this morning. And we have in the studio Ali M. Ali, who is the Deputy President, Nigerian Guild of Editors, to talk about these stories with us. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Daybreak.
Well, good morning. Good morning, viewers. It's good to be here once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like our, energy problems are compounding more and more. We are talking about aviation fuel here. We are talking about diesel here. We are talking about fuel scarcity itself and gas as well. And, just as all of this is happening also, we are seeing that the national grid is collapsing. What exactly is going on?
Well, you get the feeling that the country is grinding to a halt. That's the feeling you get. Add to this mix also is the increasing devaluation of the nation's currency. So you get this feeling that the country is gradually grinding to a halt. And I think one of the headlines, airlines also lamented the rising cost of Jet 1 fuel, which in the next 72 hours, if something dramatic is not done, as dramatic as having a fixed price, and I think they are advocating for 500 naira per litre of Jet 1 fuel. Already the cost of air travel is prohibitive. People can't move freely, thereby affecting production, if you like, because in our part of the world, movement is also production. If you don't move, you can't produce. Yeah. But with these itemized energy challenges we have, especially power, small-scale industries, you know, they can operate without constant power supply. And they more often than not rely on privately generated power, like, for example, generator, you know, but the cost of diesel, which has been deregulated long ago, is so prohibitive. And then you look at petrol, even the queues, notwithstanding the marching orders NNPC has given, NNPC, repeatedly assuring Nigerians that fuel shortage will be a thing of the past. But look at it, everywhere you see queues. And then the bridging system, because most of the bridging is done by fuel tankers, and they are powered by diesel engines. And diesel is prohibitive. And you know, making the current price regime unsustainable, unless you're playing ostrich, you know that we can't go on. I'm just being practical here. In as much as it's desirable to have lower cost of petroleum products, but in practical terms, if you're looking at it pragmatically, it's impossible to have that. It's not possible to have that. Why? Because, like I said, look at the cost of diesel, look at the cost of transportation. But all this tells you that this is the net result of years of planlessness. I've always said that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. If we had been planning all these years, like we have done in the past, especially after the Civil War, you find out, if you go back to history, that every now and again, the government will come with 2, 3, 5-year rolling plan, that in the next 5 years, this is what we're going to do. But look at us now.
So, in other words, this circumstance has brought us face to face, you know, with the need to have our refineries working.
Long overdue, long overdue. But you don't have to be a soothsayer to say that it was just a matter of time before we get to this pathetic state. What I mean pathetic, because if you look at our consumption, the consumption of domestic consumption of fuel, and then you look at the output, and then look at the total collapse of our refineries, all of them, zero refining in the last couple of years. Notwithstanding monies allocated for turnaround, it's there, it's in the public space. But we've been refining zero, literally zero.
You know, and the lead story on the Daily Trust this morning, you know, talking about, you know, the likely loss of about 1.2 billion naira daily over Ajib oil export cut. You know, there's vandalism also that we're still, you know, talking about till date. And now there is, you know, rise in the global price of crude oil, and we are not able to meet up with all of that. I mean, where does that leave us?
And then, like you said, with sabotage, which has been consistent in the last couple of years, especially with the coming of democracy in 1999, you realize that we've had these pipeline vandals. Sabotage is something that has been there for ages, and we've not been able to check that. And then insecurity, on the other hand. One way or the other is that there are linkages between sabotage, insecurity, and even, again, if you like, fifth columnist, even within the oil and gas industry, even with the management of our oil companies managing our oil resources, you find so much sabotage beyond the blowing of pipelines, then even the management itself. So all this in the mix, then you know that the future is certainly looking bleak. What do we do now? But it's a whole lot of things for us to get out of this quagmire. But it has been a vicious cycle. We may know the problems, but then do we have what it takes to fix the problems? If you look at why...
It appears that we'll be managing the problem. So each time it happens like that, we'll find a way to just, you know, suppress it.
Yeah, we gloss over the problem. We look at the effect. We don't look at the causes of the problems. We just merely look at and then we gloss over it. Then we have some, if you like, some cosmetic solution. After a while, it comes back and bites us in the butt. It has been like a vicious cycle. So what do? If you look at, in the past, when we have vandals blowing up pipelines, and then economic saboteurs also, you have to also be mindful of even those who manage the oil installation. Some of them cannot be totally blameless of what's going on there. Instances of where there is connivance. It's been there. If you ask a non-governmental organization keeping an eye on our oil sector, you find out there is a lot of connivance even. First, we under-declare the amount of oil drilled daily. Some is being diverted. At a point, I think last year, the group managing director of NNPC lamented, I think before the Nigerian Navy, that about 200,000 barrels of oil is unaccounted. It's been siphoned out of the country. Who does that? How does that happen? And that's a lot of money, 200,000 barrels per day disappeared into thin air. How do you even account for that? So yes, you get this feeling that we are going around in cycle, we are in this deep, the further we do, but unless you take certain drastic measures and then exert the political way, elsewhere you don't do that. There are other countries who are also oil producing countries. But the laxity in security, in management of the resources, of the natural resources, is it as it is in our country? That's the question. Angola, Brazil, these are oil-producing nations. Yeah. They may have their own peculiar problem, but certainly not to the extent of where Nigerians, in the extent of Nigeria. And also, people who think also that natural resources domicile in their enclave is their exclusive preserve. The mindset. There are people who think that oil resources or whatever resources they have is for their exclusive use.
Yeah. But I would think, I tend to think that we've come of that, those days where, vandalism was done basically because people in those regions feel like this is ours, and so we have the right, and so whatever, But what we see, more recently is more like a different kind of attack for a different reason, maybe for some economical reasons.
Yeah, well, that may be so, but then also, before we got to that, partly, like you said, economic reasons, but then the idea is that there are some other people who are benefiting from that economic, if you like, largesse, which they think they're not benefiting. There are people who, up to this moment, you see, look at the provision of the Petroleum Industry Act. There is a certain percentage that should be given to the oil-producing areas. Even that has not assuaged that. Well, some provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act have been suspended, like the withdrawal of subsidy now, for example, which we're going to continue with subsidy regime till 2023, which is it even tenable? But you see, all that has to do with even the political will to do some of these things, to really implement some of the provision to the latter.
Some are saying that, look, we are already feeling the brunt, of the petroleum sector in our economy. So why don't we just remove the subsidy and just face it?
Yes, I think it's a very romantic idea to just remove the cap on subsidy. Elsewhere, look at globally, rising cost of energy. If you look at other climes, in the UK, in Europe generally, in the United States, the cost of energy has gone up. People are lamenting that. But if you are to look at it, some of our problems are self-inflicted. If we had planned well, police our borders. Because we must, this thing is native to us. I mean, oil generally. And if you look at oil, the byproducts you will get from oil, look at the value chain. But we take our crude oil, and then we get the refined oil. And in the process, a lot of the value chain there is lost in transmission, or we don't get that. So if we had improved the capacity of our refineries first, and then work on them to work full capacity, even at full capacity, if they are produced, the combined strength of our refining capacity, for a nation that up to now we can't say for a fact how many liters of fuel we consume daily, but the combined capacity of our refineries, all three of them, the one in Kaduna, the one in Warri, the one in Port Harcourt, and I think this is about the three of them, there is less than 1/4 of our daily consumption. Some people say we consume as high as 5 million liters per day. But you look at the capacity, the refining capacity of our petroleum, I mean our refineries, all of them, it's less than 500,000. Kaduna is, I think, 220,000 liters per day. The one in Warri, 160, and then the one in Port Harcourt, also about that. So you look at it, all of them, less than 500,000. But hopefully with the coming of the Dangote refinery, perhaps. But even at that, it's less than 1 million liters per day. So unless we plan very well, look at our exponential growth as a people. Nigeria's population, the demand. But some people even argue otherwise, the likes of former CBN governor, that the amount of subsidy given, there is a lot of fraud there. But it's important that oil native to us, we must find a way to refine it locally. And that way we can boost even employment. But as it is now, the conglomerate, that is NNPC, which has been unbundled with courtesy of the Petroleum Industry Act, has not been alive to its responsibilities.
All right, now I'd like for us to move away from that story about petroleum and gas now and take a look at sports. And I think the Daily Trust is about the only paper that picked that story about the federal government redeeming its house allocation promise to the 1994 Nations Cup winners. That's a long time ago. And
it is. It is.
Till 2022.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about morale and the implication of that to youngsters who are aspiring to also make Nigeria proud in the sporting sector.
That's quite a while. If you remember in 1980 when Nigeria won for the first time, I think, the African Nations Cup, immediately they were rewarded with a lot of recognition. A car at the time, 1980, that's 42 years ago, and I think a house. And then in 1996 also, no, was it 96 when some of them, I think, no, under Buhari, 1984, when for the first time the Golden Eaglets won the maiden under-16 World Cup. They were giving recognition, and I think instant reward. But in this instance, nearly 20 years later, is it 20 or 30 years later, I think? 1994 to date. Yeah, 28 years later, only 28 years later. And I think the government from then till date, we're not exploited, as a government is not exploiting this occasional soccer sports glory we have, which binds the country. You know, football is about the only thing that binds Nigerians together. You see Nigerians having a united stand when it comes to soccer, sports generally. And I think, like you said, it will be an incentive for young people now. And then soccer, if you look at globally, soccer now, for some countries, is a major revenue foreign exchange earner. You understand? Africans playing in foreign leagues, especially European leagues. They make the money they send back home. What do they call it now in economic terms?
FDI.
Yeah, they get a lot of resources coming. Some of the money we got, about 10% of our foreign earnings, was through Nigerians living in diaspora. And football, indeed sports stars, they're sending home tons of cash to their relatives, to our family. So I think it's important that government, when it makes pledges like that, it's important to immediately redeem them. Otherwise,
thankfully it's coming now, though.
Better late than never.
Better late than never.
Yes,
but I'm just wondering that some of those players from that Nations Cup in 1994 are doing pretty well. That, you know, these houses, at this time, maybe at that time, it may mean, you know, quite a lot. But at this time, you know, will it mean anything?
28 years later, some of them they have really, exactly.
Have become super rich. And if you look at what they are giving now, and
but there are others also who have become not exactly a success story. I remember one of them, until recently, it was in the public domain that he was so literally living in penury. His colleagues had to come to his rescue. Dealing with it was in the public.
Yes, I recall.
You know, so
now drives a bus. I mean,
precisely, yeah, to make a living. So you understand. So it's not all that sweet and the kind of thing. There are people who also live in penury. Remember, in the days of yore, most sports stars are not really even besides their football skills, which was quite admirable, they don't have any other skills. Some of them did not go beyond a certain level of education. And you need, even if you are successful, materially successful, you need to have certain degree of useful skill away from the football pitch to succeed. Superstars, sports superstars in other climes. For example, if you look at those who play basketball, professional basketball in the United States, some of them, they have multiple degrees. Someone like Shaq O'Neal, his PhD. And after his retirement from active basketball, he invested, he's making a lot of money. Someone like Hakeem Olajuwon also, you understand? Away from basketball, he made tons of money invested. Some of our football stars, soccer stars, even those who played in foreign leagues, when they return home, they couldn't manage the success they've had. And then in a matter of time, you find them living in penury because they couldn't manage, they don't have the skills to manage these resources they've garnered. And then some of them made bad choices. And today they are biting their fingers.
The lesson there is that, no matter how skillful you are or talented you are, it's always very important to match that with education and knowledge.
Exactly, with education and knowledge and sound advice, because it takes knowledge, some education, to even get to listen, to be influenced by sound advice. Otherwise, if you don't look at this great sports boxing star, Mike Tyson, he made tons of money, but today, until his recent comeback, not through boxing, but through other sports-related, he mismanaged the resources he had because he had limited education.
All right. Well, we have also some other interesting stories really this morning. The APC convention and the APC crisis is a story that we've been seeing right from last week till this week. The crisis has just been snowballing from one level to another and all of that. And we just wonder whether there's an end to this and whether this will have an impact, on their convention on March 26th.
Certainly it would have an impact. But you see, crisis is where, when you see crises are inevitable in any system. But the ability to resolve the conflict or the crisis is what counts. Sometimes when there's this graveyard silence, it portends bad news. When you have everything is going on autopilot, everything's going on smoothly, something is not right. But the problem with APC is that its conflict resolution mechanism is either not there or is very weak. Otherwise, we've seen this happen with the PDP. But PDP, if you recall, in the 16 years it held sway at the center, it had a very strong conflict resolution mechanism. Every now and again, when they have conflicts like this, they say it was a family affair, and then they will resolve it. And then somehow, the leaders of the party at the time had a way of accommodating vested interests. But in this instance, you'll find out that the party is interlocked in this lingering conflict because there is an absence of a workable conflict resolution mechanism.
But I thought that there's a committee that was set up,
for reconciliation.
Yes, for reconciliation, headed by Abdullahi Adamu, that even, received petitions from members to address their grievances and all that.
But has it really resolved some of the state chapters that engulf in crisis? Like, for example, the Kano chapter is still in court. The one in Bauchi is still in court. So, but what has that resolved, really, in the real sense? But you see, more than anything else, the latest crisis now would bedevil the party till the convention period. And it's just a matter of time. And I think in Blueprint, in the course of the headline, I think one of the senators there, I think Ali Indume, was saying that, look, the position of the 19 governors, which the governor of Kaduna State announced as responsible for the ouster, the supposed ouster of the caretaker committee chairman, the governor of Yobe State, their position would prevail. We are talking of 19 governors. After how many? 22 or 3?
But there will be, if they insist on that position, isn't that going to have a negative, a very disastrous implication?
Certainly.
Perhaps the convention may not even hold.
No, well, the convention is going to hold because I think the Federal High Court yesterday vacated that order. It's going to hold. And then the Constitution is very clear on what the powers of a political party. You cannot stop a political party, according to the...
yes, so but now, if the governors are insisting that Buni should go out, should be taken out of the leadership, and, you have INEC saying that, they do not recognize any change in leadership and that the party needs at least 21 days to be able to, hold that convention and so on and so forth. If you look at all of these timelines and, and the formalities that needs to be, taking, definitely it will mean that the convention will not hold.
Yeah, well, but that scenario is likely or unlikely to happen because I think the leader of the party, that's the president now, has thrown his weight behind Mai Mala Buni to conduct the convention. So I think that scenario is not likely to happen. But if, for example, that what you sketch prevailed, then the party is heading to the 2023 election without any presidential candidate. And certainly even gubernatorial candidate in some of the states, unless some of the elements move to another political party, hijack it, and then have their way. But if that scenario were to prevail, if that was to happen, then APC is just a matter of time before it implodes. Even now, people they have this deep suspicion that March 26 convention, the fallout may not be manageable by the leaders of the APC, because if people fail to have their way, a lot of people are going to express their reservation or unhappiness if they fail to to have their way by maybe defection to other political parties. And that's why some other political parties, the likelihood of a third force. Already you will see that some people are experimenting with the idea of a third force somewhere else. For example, Rabi Musa Konkoso, notwithstanding that he has said, even in Daily Strut today, yesterday I heard him on BBC, saying that he's still in PDP. But then he's using the NMP as a bargaining chip to flex his muscles, to see how relevant he may be at the center in national politics. But certainly back home in his home state, Konkoso is quite influential. He has a large followership, but at the national level now, maybe perhaps that's why he may not have the, it's still work in progress for him. So if APC goes ahead, which is likely that it will go ahead to hold the convention by March 26 under the leadership of Mai Mala Buni, and some of the aggrieved politicians, especially the governors, if they don't have their way, I see a lot of realignment of forces.
Oh, well, it's a deep, it's a tight corner here.
It is.
Because either way, there's still a problem. Yes. Whether you hold the convention, if you don't hold the convention, there's still a problem. So we'll get to see and we'll continue to follow up. Now, let's take a short break. And then when we come back, we'll round up on this segment of the show. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you are just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. And we still have the Deputy President, Nigerian Guild of Editors, Ali M. Ali, in the studio with us, giving us perspectives on some of the stories on our front pages this morning. And of course, we are seeing also there's this trade of words between the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, and the governor of Edo State, Obaseki. You know, they're calling each other traitors and all that. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, it's sad, really, because these are leaders. They should be more circumspect in their utterances. I have always maintained that leaders are not like ordinary people. What they say impact on their followers. But coming at a time like this, you know that this is not unconnected with the 2023 election. And both Wike especially sees himself as the leader of the PDP, rightly or wrongly. He has this strong, and then in a way, he feels that he's also partly responsible for the electoral success of somebody like Obaseki. And you know, Obaseki, by his own nature, also abhors an overbearing, if you like, godfather. This is what causes fallout with Oshimole, you know, and the people of Edo, you know, remember, and APC made the fatal mistake, if you like, of having someone like Bola Tinubu to get directly involved with the politics of Edo, leading to the re-election of Obaseki. When the people of Edo say, look, Edo no be Lagos. You understand? And the same thing now, the Obaseki is saying, look, Edo is not Rivers, in a way. This is why he's saying. That
he said that they don't accept political bullies.
Exactly.
Those were his words.
And exactly, more or less. You understand that, trying to resist this godfather-like disposition of Wike. Wike has been behaving like a godfather in the party, if you take it or leave it, because he's more than, if you remember, the 2019 election, the primaries was held in Rivers State, and Wike was the sitting governor at the time. To show his power, people say Wike is responsible largely for hoisting the leadership of the PDP, that it was him who bankrolled the PDP convention. It's there in the public space. So he sees himself rightly, and then because he's keenly interested in the 2023 election, either as presidential candidate or vice presidential aspirant. I mean, he's not made it known, but if you look at his permutation, his alliances, but then he has one, if you like, to me, both of them have one tragic, if you like, almost tragic flaw. They are verbally unrestrained. There are things that you do. There are comments you don't make. Let others do the comment. The same way that Umahi dissed the judiciary and to a lesser extent the media. And then Umahi is also relying on the judiciary to reclaim his validated mandate in court. So, and then at the same time, like Hausa people will say, you've not crossed the river, you are busy insulting the crocodile. This is what he's doing. You need the judiciary. The same way, if Wike, you need the support of everyone. There is a way you can express your dissatisfaction without going to the public domain and washing your dirty linens. But either way, both of them are an example of how not to communicate. But it's something that has happened. If you look at Autumn, look at other governors, who the way they speak like area boys. That's my own take, my understanding. There are things you don't just say, just like you know as an anchor here. There are things you are not allowed to say on air. You can't, no matter how passionate you are about that, because of the spiral effect it will have on your viewers and listeners. So, and then you have people commanding executive authority. Wike, Obaseki, these are people, if they sign on the death warrant of inmates, they'll be killed. And then you are talking like area boys. So it's unfortunate, and I think their handlers will find a way to prevail on them. Not just them, any other leader, whatever level. It could be at a very senior level as a governor. It could be as something as at a relatively down there like a councillor. You have to be mindful of your spoken and even written words. Otherwise, you inflame a lot of passions, and then destroy bridges of friendship.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Daybreak. We'll have to end this session at this point. We appreciate your coming. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. We've been speaking with the Deputy President, Nigeria Guild of Editors, Ali M. Ali. He is our reviewer for today, taking a look at the stories on our front pages, and their implication on our, political economy, generally speaking. Now, we'll be taking a short breather, and then when we return, we will continue on the discussion on the program. Please stay with us. This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story. All right, thank you for staying with us. And now we have Sunday Michael, the Deputy Business Editor of Daily Trust, joining us here on the program to talk about some of these issues. Now, before we, take a look at the issues of the day, I would like to get your thoughts on this, aviation crisis, because now it's not just aviation anyways. The whole petroleum and energy sector in the country, and now, by extension, the aviation is also affected, by that. How much of a problem is this?
I think it's obvious the enormity of problem we are dealing with. The country is in a near paralysis, if you like. The birds are not flying, the cars are not moving, the houses are not lit. Just about everything is on a standstill. I was driving to this point, and up till this day, some 6 weeks after, we are still battling to get fuel. People are still spending anywhere between 30 minutes and 1 hour on queue just to get petrol. Schools are calling parents to say, we are unable to pick up your wards today from your houses because the school buses don't have fuel. You don't have even the ones to power your small generators to provide the alternative power for your households that the public power holding or the private power holding companies are unable to pass to you. Yesterday we heard about that we lost another 1,100 megawatts from a grid that is even suboptimal, that was managing to produce somewhere around 3,000 megawatts all week after a near total collapse somewhere within last week. We are also hearing that diesel is nearing about 800 naira per liter in Lagos, the heartbeat of businesses in the country, and so half of the offices had to shut down because even at that price, they can't find the diesels to buy. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on and on. The impact is just permeating just about every facet of our national life. And what is painful is that what seemed to be engaging the minds of our politicians is how to perpetuate themselves come 2023. It's sad.
And, going by projection, if we may, into the GDP of the first quarter of the year, what is it likely to look like? I mean, what is it likely to be?
Even the discussions we had on petrol alone for nearly 4 weeks was enough to alter those projections, because what we are seeing today is an increase in food prices occasioned by an increase in transport, occasioned by, the near absence of supply of fuel. We are also battling with a number of us, you and I inclusive, who had to fix our vehicles from damaged or poisonous petroleum product in a country where you have all kinds of regulatory activities around that sector. We are battling with providing our own power, whether for businesses or for households. So can you imagine what it will be if, say, a barber's shop that relies on generator at, say, 160 naira per liter, now buying the same fuel anywhere between 400 and 500 naira per liter?
It is likely to land us into another recession.
But because we don't take these signals anywhere serious, all these simple indicators that have the capacity to stretch the already difficult situation we don't take them seriously. If we are worried about those indicators, then we should be, leaders should be seen up and down, not just offering lame excuses on TV or even trying to explain away what is happening. I mean, imagine the House of Rep calling airliners and aviation marketers to come and agree on a price in itself that look ridiculous. 500 naira per liter for aviation fuel from 200 naira only a couple of weeks back. That they could even agree to drop from 600 to 500 means whatever they are making as a margin per liter is even outrageous. I mean, why should we even be discussing that? For products they brought into this country 1-2 months ago, even before the commencement of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. It shows you a complete absence of supervision, of absence of leadership. And so everybody in the market behaves the way they like because nobody in the market can call them to order. And why are the members of the parliament worried anyway? Because they have already jettisoned road transport, as part of their calendar. They just hop into locations where there are airports, and all of that. And they're running around for the primaries and the election. They will really need these things to be in the sky to enable them to go around what they need to do to remain in power. So you can see why they are worried at the level of parliament and intervening. You would wish we had this kind of seriousness as intervention for the period that we have had the difficulties with petroleum sector or even the energy sector. Perhaps maybe would have made a bit more progress than where we are today.
Okay, so I would like to ask again, that is this likely to land us into another recession?
It has all the potentials to land us in a recession. It has all the potentials because this is going to worsen the inflation. We've been dealing with an inflation rate that appears very high simply because food prices have refused to abate, occasioned by the insecurities in our food-producing regions. Now, imagine adding a skyrocketed increase in the price of transportation, which has impact on just about everything, transporting goods to the farm or even to the market, or, it has a direct impact on every household. And so you go to the market, things that, somebody was telling me yesterday, a crate of egg that used to be around 1,100 today sells for over 2,000. So the impact, can be seen across, is it businesses that used to run on diesel at 200, 180 or 220 per liter that are now buying at 650, that will give you the service at the same price they used to offer them yesterday. That's inflation, shooting out of hands, and the indices are clear for everybody to see. So if the numbers for these figures come back negative, writing off all of the gains that we have seen previously, it will not be a surprise to somebody like me.
All right. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria has revealed that Nigeria spent about $13.1 billion in the last 11 years to settle Nigeria's foreign debt obligations. Now, the international payment data released by the CBN show that from 2011 to 2021, the amount paid to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Exim Bank of China, among others, for debt service and payments, have continued to increase. When you look at that, the last 10 years, that is, all that we have borrowed, and we're paying this amount, of course we have to pay, isn't it? But is it justifiable in the sense that have we been able to justify the collection of that money in terms of investment in the critical sectors that we need to have, invested?
That's a difficult question, largely because there are absence of data to show exactly where these borrowings, went into. First of all, the question would really be, what is there to show vis-a-vis the amount collected that there was value for money? 13.1 billion, to situate them appropriately for a Nigerian, will be over 6 trillion naira. That is the size of our capital budget consistently for about 3 years. The money that ordinarily should have gone into capital expenditure, we used in servicing debt. And that debt service has risen astronomically that today, for every 100 naira that we earn as a country, we are using 92 naira or thereabout to pay back our debtors as debt service. So the justification for these things would have been better if we were able to show, for instance, that we borrowed money to complete the Abuja, Kaduna, Kano Expressway, and today we can show that road is up and functional. Then we say, okay, we got a certain $1 billion for this road, and at least we can point to the road. It would have been better if we were able to show that we collected a certain $2 billion for the second Niger Bridge, and today we can point to a second Niger Bridge. Right? So evaluation would have been easy if our borrowings were tied to infrastructure. But painfully, And until recent years, most of those borrowings were not tied to infrastructure. They were largely borrowings to supplement the overhead expenditures. They were borrowings to pay salaries. And to that extent, borrowing for consumption cannot be justifiably said to be a wise way, of borrowing, because consumption doesn't pay back the debt. It is infrastructure, the improvement of infrastructure, and ultimately the improvement in productivity, that can enable you raise the kind of revenues that you need to pay back your debt.
I mean, and the borrowing, hasn't stopped yet. I mean, every now and then we see that, the president sends for this. And what are the chances that, we're likely to see the decrease in the borrowings that we're doing, looking at some of the, issues that we are now dealing with right now? I mean, yes, there's this increase in the global price of crude oil, but it doesn't look like Nigeria is making the most out of it.
Clearly, the indices we are looking at today doesn't suggest we are stopping the borrowing anytime soon. If anything, we are even multiplying the rate at which we borrow. Sometimes in 2018, 2019, we were increasing our annual borrowing by about 3 trillion naira. But in 2020, we borrowed 5 trillion. Last year, we borrowed another 5 trillion. This year, we are likely to borrow another 5 trillion. Those are the early indicators. So we have grown our debt portfolio by about 15 trillion in 3 years. That's huge. Today, sitting around 37 trillion, or if you like, $92 billion. So it doesn't look like we will stop, because there are no alternative funds coming from anywhere to fund some of the infrastructural projects that we have captured in our national spending plan, or if you like, the budget. So it will continue, largely because we have a revenue crisis. We are not earning as much as we should for the size of this economy. And when I say earning as much as we should, we are talking about diversified earnings, from especially non-oil sectors. Quite a number of sectors in Nigeria are just there for the naming. They are not returning as much value as you would expect for a country like Nigeria. Take the solid mineral sector, for instance. I mean, the contribution of the solid mineral sector to our GDP is completely negligible. It's not doing as much as it should do for a country that is as endowed as Nigeria. You would think, for instance, that if we were very serious, even though agriculture is doing so much, it should be doing in quadruples of the current number it is doing. You would think that manufacturing, if they had the right kind of government support, should be doing far much more than they are doing, because it is in these sectors that you have the potentials to create jobs and to create wealth. And until those sectors are taken for the seriousness that they deserve and the attention that they really deserve, rather than mere rhetorics, and when we allow them flourish the way they should, we'll continue to look up to oil. Oil, like we rightly mentioned, once the prices go above $75 to $80, $85 in Nigeria, there is really nothing to cheer about, because we basically just sell the oil and then we use the proceeds for the importation of petroleum products and all byproducts associated with it, like the aviation fuel, diesel, kerosene, and the likes.
Okay, now, I think about 2 days or 3 days ago, I saw on the papers Nigerian government, seeking funding from the United States to fund the oil and this gas sector to be able to supply the United States, against the backdrop of the crisis between Russia, and Ukraine and all of that. So if you look at something like that, does that present us with the crisis now? Does it present us with an opportunity to make some kind of fair deal, with, some of these international, I would say, foreign bodies rather?
To be honest, I do not think that the absence of the crisis between Russia is what has prevented us from making a fair deal. I think we have never really taken the potentials of these sectors to change our narrative seriously. Even with the appeal to the United States, it doesn't really imply that the United States government will have to put some funding into infrastructure. It will be largely getting investors in the United States to invest in this sector. But investments, investors, as the case may be, are not just dullants who are just sitting and waiting for you to appeal to them and they move capitals into your system. They are scanning on their own without even an invitation. They are looking around for places with the best conditions in terms of what you are offering, in terms of operating environment, for places with the right kind of government, with the right kind of judiciary to protect their business should they come into some kind of log jams between the systems of the government, to put their money in. And the opportunities do not only exist in Nigeria. In the African sub-region, we have competition. And these places are coming up with all kinds of innovations and incentives to attract FDIs. And until we are willing to wake up to match the kind of incentives they are providing, or even better, capitals would not just wake up and flow into this country. You know, so it is more a question of how we put our house together with regards to implementing the petroleum industry bill and all of, all of the innovations, all of the incentives thereof, which in a way shows us off as a serious nation that is desirous of attracting new funding into oil and gas. Other than that, merely just sitting down and appealing while dealing with the kind of circumstances we have would not help matters. I mean, we woke up yesterday to the news of Ajib declaring a force majeure because some of his pipelines were ruptured. And therefore, they are saying they would not be able to meet contractual obligation because of what is described as a natural disaster, because that's a condition they didn't create. It was ruptured by people from around that environment who may be using that as a window to protest their grievances either against Ajib or even against the Nigerian state. These are the kind of conditions that oil majors contend with, right? And so the question would be, why would anybody reading that kind of news find your environment the most suitable, to bring in fresh funds?
All right, now, I mean, so if we do not, we've been talking about this ease of doing business, we've been talking about creating the right business environment for people to be able to come and invest in Nigeria. Definitely is our way out, of boosting revenue and all of that, because clearly, public funds and, it's not there really. So looking at, all the loopholes that we are having, how can we block some of these loopholes to show up revenue so that at least we can cut down on these borrowings?
There are quite a number of options that are available to Nigeria. To be honest, it is the economics, has evolved so much that we cannot say that where we are is an impossible situation. There are quite a number of options available to us, and these options are multi-sectorial, they are multi-dimensional. On the one hand, we know some of this borrowing are done, to augment public spending on overhead, largely salaries. And so the question would really be, do we need the current size of the civil service we have? That's a question we have always run away from. Every government is not interested in answering this question. If you recall, it was debates like this several years ago that gave birth to the Orasanyas committee, which sat down and said, we have multiple agencies carrying out duplicating and overlapping functions, each of them with chief executives and all kinds of boards and councils, drawing from the public purse and adding no value to the public space. We needed to either merge or even outrightly scrap some of them. That report has been swept under the carpet. This agency talked about even shrinking some, and all of that.
Well, rather, we are talking about increasing seats at the National Assembly
every day, so we have not answered that critical question. That is on the one hand of it, managing over bloated public service. And so the painful thing is, the size of the public service is just a miniatural aspect of our population, takes up all that money to the detriment of people who are working in the private sector and adding value to the public space. So you have a country who are taking our general patrimony and spending it just on a fraction of our population to the detriment of people. Because the only way you and I who are in public service who do not draw salaries from the government circle, the only way we benefit from government activity is when the roads are tight, when power is made available, when we can buy fuel with ease. That's the only real benefit we can connect to. But if all we earn, including what we go out to borrow, which becomes my responsibility and that of my own children, is spent on a few of us, then it doesn't feel like the government spending is fair to every aspect of its population. That's just another aspect of it. One other is, do we have to borrow to do some of the public projects enumerated? For instance, the argument had always been between analysts and financial experts whether it made economic sense for the government to borrow to tar the road between Lagos and Ibadan, the busiest route in the country. When you know that if you had put out that road for a PPP, private fundings would have gone into tying those places and tolling it, and because it's a busy route, they'll be able to recoup their investment in no distant time. So the question really is, why should you take funds, for instance, that you'd have used in providing other critical public service to fixing a road that private fundings can fix? Do you need federal government funding to do a Kano-Kaduna-Abuja road? Do you need federal government funding to do the second Niger bridge? These are critical questions. The other questions would be selling off a near-dead assets. We've been spending so much on turnaround maintenance on refineries that have refused to turn around. So why continue to weep a dead horse? And within the periods we've been spending on this turnaround, several billions of dollars, by the way, an individual sank about $14 to $17 billion in building a petrochemical industrial complex, one of the biggest in the world, 4 times the size of Victoria Island. One individual. So how do you explain how government has not been able to turn around 4 refineries with all the resources available to her and the personnel, and one individual will start from scratch, from filling a ground to finishing up a petrochemical concept that is now producing fertilizers ahead of official commencement of the production of fuel and all of that in 3 or 6 months. So those are options. There are other options that were provided as debt swap. So if the debt burden is becoming too much, can't you renegotiate these things with these persons and say, we have some national assets where we are calling for private investment. If you cut down this debt and we convert them to Naira rather than the dollar form, we can then convert them, we could swap them into equities. We will make these things the equivalent of these numbers of shares in these refineries so that you become a part owner of that investment. It can be run professionally, and then you can take dividends in the future or even outrightly sell down to public interest or other interest from the world and pull out those funds. So these are innovative ways that debt can be managed so that you don't continue to pool public resources and sink them into projects that take eternity to come up, and we get to a situation where today you make 100 Naira and spend 92 Naira paying debts.
All right. Well, now we will take a short break, and then when we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the program. Please stay with us.
Strengthening the national actors' capacities and advocacy for ending serious human rights violations in Nigeria, otherwise known as the SAFE Project, is an initiative of Advocates Sans Frontières in collaboration with the European Union, among other stakeholders, to champion the implementation of human rights, the Anti-Torture Act, and building advocacy around issues regarding police brutality, extrajudicial killings, among other human rights abuses. According to the head of office of Advocates Sans Frontières in Nigeria, Angela Uzoma Iwuchukwu, she explains that the Situation Room was created to improve partnership between civil society and the police to address issues regarding implementation and promotion of human rights in Nigeria.
We acknowledge the fact that a lot had happened, also given the aftermath of the NSAS protest, and we wanted to make sure that it is clear to everyone that the civil society and the police are working together to promote human rights. The SAFE project, as we saw in the video, is really addressing key issues of human rights violations, particularly as it pertains to the use of torture by security personnel in Nigeria, and also issues of extrajudicial killings and arbitrary detention.
Representing the European Union, the head of Governance, Peace and Migration section, Clément Boutillier, says the project remains important as it targets human rights violations as well as addressing the root causes of conflicts.
The SAFE project is a very important one from the European Union because it's targeted at addressing human rights violations, torture, extrajudicial killings, and arbitrary detentions. It's both an issue of human rights and also it's an issue of addressing the root causes of conflicts in Nigeria.
Also, the program director of Carmelite Prisoners Interest Organization, Father Ambrose Ekeroko, faulted the EndSARS protest as well as other attacks on security personnel as the result of continuous violation of the rights of Nigerians by security agencies.
We saw EndSARS coming, where people are beginning to push back and complain about the excessive use of force by the security forces in the country. All of these are as a result of the lingering situation or cases of human rights violation.
On his part, the acting Force Public Relations Officer Muyiwa Adejobi pledged the commitment of the force to name and shame officers who violate citizens' rights.
We have trust deficit. People still don't believe in us. Like I told PROs, thank God Edokon is there. I said the new system is name and shame them. If a policeman who has been sent to go and enforce the law is the one killing, attacking, suppressing, harassing Nigerians, why are you hiding such a person? Let Nigerians know the name of the person and what he has done. You see so many videos trending on social media. We have ICT officers that will track them, forward to us, and forward to the CPs to try. So in as much as we know that our men will always misbehave on the field, we want CSOs, individuals, Nigerians to believe in us that we don't pamper them.
The Police and Civil Society's Situation Room Dialogue is a product of the SAFE project, which was commissioned in 2018. The Situation Room Dialogue is the second meeting of the stakeholders who first met in the year 2021. Sagir Ibrahim reporting for Trust TV.
The idea was to give the interim government confidence that there is somebody, a military man, who is well known, who can be accepted.
You alluded to the case of your son, Umar Farouk. Are you in touch with him?
Yes, he phones us 2 times, sometimes 3 times in a month.
As always, when I'm talking about late Abiola, I still thank my God for directing me on things to do when he gave me that leadership of this country.
Many of you honest Fulanis, you allow this man to cast aspersion on you.
You know, Zamfara is the mother of all bandits.
The biggest problem, if you permit me, is the fact that we have not been able to get the totality of our citizenry.
It's very, very difficult to have a fixed mind like that this one you will hand over to this person because you think he will do better.
I don't see myself under no circumstance ever leaving APC for another political party.
Here on the Mambila Plateau. And this is where the hydroelectric power dam is supposed to be constructed.
Most people in Nigeria are ignorant of the fact that employing a child as a maid is in fact against the law.
Access to the textile mill has been very difficult.
I believe or I think that if you want to make money, it should be in a place where there are not plenty of people that can do what you do.
From the way things are happening now, I don't think the two parties will make any impact.
I've been talking about the updates concerning the campaign of Nigerian Super Eagles in Abuja.
Bola Tinubu has informed President Muhammadu Buhari of his ambition to contest for the position of President.
To be self-reliant, a blind man defies all odds to become a carpenter in Gombe State.
The country is now experiencing a fourth wave of the COVID-19 pandemic with the emergence of the Omicron variant.
Talks are ongoing between NRC management and the union.
All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. We have in the studio Sunday Michael, the Deputy Business Editor of Daily Trust newspaper. Now we are talking about Nigeria's debt rate and, the debt servicing and how much it is taking out of the country's, revenue. And now we are talking about alternative sources, of funds, aside these borrowings that we've been doing, like we saw based on the report that was released by the Central Bank of Nigeria, over $30 million was paid to the IMF, the World Bank, the Exim Bank of China, and other borrowing platforms. Now, talking about other sources of funding. We talked about, how we can show up revenue from other sources. Certain projects can actually be done by the private sector without necessarily federal government, engaging in that. But in recent times, we've seen that with the NNPC project, talking about the tax credit projects, in some of the projects that the federal government is doing. Do you think that that is coming late?
Maybe we should have started 10 years earlier. Like you said in the program before this, it's better late than never. But the tax credit initiative already is intervening in over 10 roads, critical roads, on the, I think, Aba Port Harcourt Expressway, Enugu Onitsha Expressway, I think some portions of the Ilorin, Ogbomosho, Oyo, Ibadan Expressway. I'm not sure if they are the ones on the Benin-Ore Expressway or it's the Sukuk 123 that is there. But we have seen these are innovative financing, that is taking the burden of the federal government, sinking these amounts directly into these places. And because it will be taken out as tax credit to this company, what it then means to us is we'll have this road fixed, first of all, according to the specifications that are approved by the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, without necessarily belaboring the government in terms of raising these monies from our coffers, and then designing frameworks that make taking out this money
in such a manner that doesn't also rob government of so much revenues to meet other obligations. So if a company, for instance, brings out 10 billion to fix a road as approved on the tax credit, usually it will be given the company as tax credit over a number of years. You know, they keep taking it out of the taxes that are due to government over a period of years. So the burden that is borne by government is spread over a period of time such that the impact is not in one fell swap. So that's innovative financing. Those are the kind of things we are talking about.
Can that apply to just literally every project? Say, for instance, the rail project, for instance.
Absolutely. In the case of the rail project, maybe not directly as you have with the roads, but what in the rail project, as we have seen in other claims, we have seen a build, operate, and transfer, build, operate, and own initiative. So government more or less identify the corridors that are critical, and then government comes up with some kind of arrangement through the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission to say, this is what we want to achieve, this is the standard we are looking at, this is the funding it may take, these are the kind of concession we are offering, this is our estimation of the volume of traffic that these places will take, this is how we want it done. If you can bring the funding to provide the rail as a corridor, then every wagon that runs on this rail, whether public or private, will pay you a certain amount of money over a period of time. If you also want, you can approach us for a holistic development, like build the tracks, put the wagons, and run it, and return to us instead taxis and what have you, as we have in the case of states that own private airports, right? Or build the corridors, allow other private players to play in the corridors, and recoup over a period of time and hand it over to us, or perpetually manage where we take a percentage of your operation. Or once you have built it and it is complete and we have certified that this is complete, you would transfer 40% of the equity or the stake of that business to us. You retain 60, or transfer 49% and retain 51, and then we'll continue to run it as a going concern forever, and you continue to make your money while we all pay taxes to government. So you see, the models are many. Mm-hmm. The question is whether we are willing to try out those models.
Now, talking about taxes now, there are those who have made the argument that perhaps we should see more Nigerians pay more tax to government. Are we doing enough in that regard, in your own experience?
You can't tax a dead business. You have to be alive to pay taxes. So the question is, how many percentage of Nigerians are gainfully employed? And that is why even when companies make losses, there's nothing to tax. You tax profit. You don't tax losses. So even if I'm in a business and I can't break even, what is there to tax? So why does it make sense to say increase the tax net? Well, who are we even looking for? The question would really be, let us create the conditions that would create wealth, that would then create taxes. That's what makes sense. It's not about, every time we hear about increasing the tax net in Nigeria, well, some have argued that it's about bringing people who are not on the tax net into the tax net, the informal sector. Yeah, but that's one. But what we have often seen is belaboring the few who are paying to even pay more by introducing all kinds of extraneous tax. Today, the only way we are maintaining our tertiary institutions is from the 1% education tax funds on the profits of bank. There is another kind of tax fund that is also there for UBEs. So all kinds of, there is an ICT tax fund on every ICT item that comes into this country. There is a vehicle tax that funds the Nigerian Automobile Council. All kinds of, everything coming from the few companies that have managed to defy the odds to remain in business. So the question, if you are not careful, you will just run those companies aground because you're trying to look for more money.
And, a very chunk of, our private sector is largely informal.
Yeah.
How do we, formalize, some of these ventures? And, why are we not doing as much, when it comes to,
formalizing them would not only be about merely being interested in capturing them for tax purposes. You formalize them if they see incentives in becoming formal. They have seen people around them who are registered businesses struggling to fare. Why do you think they want to come under that bracket? So the question really is, if I am playing in a sector and I've been playing underground and informal, and I have another person who plays in the sector, enjoys all kinds of government loans and intervention at near 0% or maybe minimal one-digit interest rate, and I'm seeing all kinds of supports from government intervention. I see how he gets easy access to government incentives or even export promotions or all kinds of things. Why would I not strive to come into the same bracket that will enable me enjoy the same incentive? But if the guy becoming known has been a dilemma for him, he has had
target of exploitation.
Why would I want to move from where I am to that position where he is? So what the government has done world over to bring people, to move people from the informal to the formal sector is the barrage of incentives that they have made available at one end that seem to be calling people to say, hey, come in here. I had a friend, or rather still my friend, who moved over to the state. And within the pandemic, she walked up to the tax office and said, I had come to regularize my taxes. By my calculations, I've made ABC and XYZ income, and I think my tax calculation is this. I've come to so that we can sit down and reconcile, and then I have that tax is paid. And the government said, no, you probably are not aware. We had made the decision that people from this bracket who had been faithful, who can show track record of having paid in the last 1, 2, or 3 years, we would not take any tax from them. So that they can plug back what was supposed to be that tax payment into the business and allow it survive, so that they can employ one more American. We can keep one more American off the streets. That's important to us. And then they said, oh, by the way, in addition to the fact that you have been faithful, the government has also made some stipends available for you. So you will get a tax credit from the ones you have paid in the past. We are refunding $1,000 to you. So that you can also put back in that business and let it breathe. We are more interested in you keeping people at work. And before you go, as an extra incentive for your faithfulness, go and look at your business and come up with a realistic plan of an expansion. What can you do to expand the scope of this business? Even if it's by a small margin, we will fund it as a zero interest rate. Why would I not look forward to paying the next tax?
Interesting. In other words, we should be looking at incentives on how to make
It's more about
people
incentive
join.
Because until you create wealth, you cannot tax it.
All right. Well, I mean, quite a lot to chew, as far as this is concerned. It appears that, the way to, move away from borrowing, it has more to do with fixing our, internal workings and the systems and structures that we have in the business environment. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
My pleasure again.
Yeah. All right. With that, we have come to the end of the program for today. It's been quite interesting, really. And those who have missed can always catch up on our YouTube and also connect with us via our social media platforms. There you can see other programs as well. Join us tomorrow for another time on the program. My name is Ayuba Ilya.
And I'm Zainab Bala. See you tomorrow.
Bye for now.